Welcome back to the Craft Beer Runner. Today I want to continue a conversation I started last week with Leah. Today we have my friend Randy on. Randy works for Southern California Edison, and some of the work he's done there includes work on solar energy and battery packs. So I wanted to invite him on today to share a beer with me and you, and just talk a little bit more about solar energy. So Randy, welcome on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Good seeing you again, as always. And I think we're flannel brothers today.
Well, I'm from the Pacific. I'm now from the Pacific Northwest, so I got to look the part, right? I got the beard, I got the flannel. What are you drinking today?
Today I am drinking Mango IPA by Belching Beaver. This is my first time actually having the beer. I'm an IPA fan. I wanted to try something new for the channel. So
Cool. And I believe they're out of Oceanside, California, down San Diego area. Is that right?
yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Cool. And then I'm going back to one of my quasi-local favorites. They're out of Portland, but they have their tap house here in Seattle now. I'm going with Great Notion, these Squatch Bat Larry. It's kind of like a dessert beer. I love their cans, though. It's just
Nice.
full moon. You even got the Space Needle there. It's a tart ale, blackberry, boysenberry, and vanilla. And that vanilla kind of makes it really desserty. Let's open this up real quick.
Wherever you want to reference. Here we go.
Are you going to be classy, or are you just going to go straight from the can?
We drink straight from the can today, I guess. I think last
Nothing wrong
week
with
I
that.
drank from a cup, so I got to give the show some variety.
Of course, I did a terrible job on that pour tonight.
That's pretty good, actually.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. So welcome, Randy. I appreciate you coming on. I've known Randy for about just over 10 years now, probably 11 years now. We met in business school over at University of Southern California. Went to the Marshall School of Business there for our MBAs. Randy was the class of 2011, so he was a year behind me. And we've been friends ever since, even though now we're was it 1,800 miles separated, but whatever. So Randy, after you graduated with your MBA, you started at Southern California Edison, correct?
That's correct. So graduated from my MBA 2011, and as you said, went to Southern California Edison to work in energy. Had you asked me at any point in my life, would I ever work in the energy industry? The answer would have been no. Quite frankly, throughout the recruiting process, energy wasn't necessarily on my radar, but the pitch that Southern California Edison gave was so tantalizing, and it drew me in, just how they talked about the dramatic change that the industry would be experiencing because of renewables such as solar, and decarbonizing the grid and things that will become important over the next 10, 20 years. And so for me, that was really the appeal, to be part of an industry that served a much broader purpose other than giving me a paycheck.
Right. And then, so you've been there for 9 years, and the past 5 or so, you've been project manager, correct?
Yeah, past 5 or so. So it's more product development and more product management. So developing energy products that ultimately customers end up using to help them become a partner, if you will, in helping to operate the grid more efficiently and more cleanly. And from an energy perspective, or at least from an SCE perspective, not that I'm speaking on behalf of SCE in this interview or anything like that, right? Put that disclaimer out there, but these products help the grid overall. And I can get into more detail about what that means in a little bit.
Right. And do you want to talk about some of the projects you worked on in the past few years that were in the renewable realm?
Yeah. I think the one that's most relevant is the one that I've been working on for the last 2 years, and that's called Virtual Power Plant Pilot. The project has gotten tons of press as of late, but essentially what it is, me and my team, we have developed partnerships with different solar and battery providers. And not only solar and battery providers, but also customers who have these technologies installed on the premises in their home or on their roofs and in their garage. And we have, at this point, aggregated, a couple hundred of those systems. And the concept behind it is that we can operate those in a way that mimics a traditional power plant. But it's not a traditional power plant, right? Because it's not a diesel plant, it's not a natural generator plant, it's solar, it's batteries, it's pretty much as clean as you can be. But in terms of the functionality that you get from these things by operating them in unison, you're able to provide services to the grid that in the past you would have had to, count on let's just say a diesel generator providing. But you can get those same services, relatively speaking, by partnering with customers and obviously paying them to utilize their solar and their batteries in a way. And when you put all those things together, it's called a virtual power plant pilot, essentially.
Right. Now, in terms of like solar energy in general, on the residential side, do you want to talk about a little bit how that works? If you're producing your own energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll go even broader than that. I think there is a misperception to start that the energy companies are anti-solar, right? Because I think some people look at it as a competing resource, right, compared to the energy that the utilities produce and sell, for lack of a better term, right? But the reality is, the utilities are they are going to have to play a very significant role in decarbonizing the grid. And, it's been shown that the most effective, least cost way to decarbonize the grid is through building electrification, right? And so that means, the gas company won't be too enthusiastic about this, but, for lack of a better description, that means ripping out the gas and putting in things that require energy. And so, that require electricity as opposed to gas. And so that's the best cost, least effective way to decarbonize the grid. And where solar and batteries come into play for that, they're another form of energy, right? And so in order to reach a state of carbon neutrality by 2045, which is a goal, 50% of the energy production is estimated to come from solar on residential, right? That doesn't even include the utility scale solar, right? And also from a resiliency standpoint, having the solar and having the batteries in particular in homes will help to make the grid more resilient, which is important, especially if everything's going to be 100%, electricity, right? So if the power goes out, you have to be able to sustain, the power goes out from time to time, just because of maintenance or because of other reasons. And
because we put our power lines above ground in cities like Seattle, where wind and trees happen to fall down, wind blows the trees down quite frequently. We actually lost our power here 2-3 weeks ago for about 6-7 hours, just as the sun was going down. It's an annoyance because it's bad planning. You have a very windy, wet city, trees are going to come down, bury the lines.
Yeah, bury the lines. Obviously that's a more expensive solution, but longer term could definitely be a solution. Manage the trees to the extent that you can. As far as trimming and taking the appropriate actions. And something that the utilities have been doing that's a little less popular these days is actually cutting power, in the event that you have a wind or weather event that's going to happen, to prevent permanent cut off the power, due to wind or other weather conditions. Right. So
that also relates to the fires, the preemptive cutting of power for forest fires and stuff like that to reduce the overall damage.
Exactly.
If we're talking about residential solar, you're in Pasadena or the Los Angeles area, and I'm here in Seattle. Definitely two different climates. The amount of sun that we get here is definitely not as much as the amount of sun you get in Southern California.
Yeah.
How does solar work in areas that aren't Southern California?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is they work well because there's sun, obviously, but they don't work as well. That's one of the challenges of solar, right? It's an intermittent resource, and depending on the season, you could be getting lots of sun, or you could be getting absolutely no sun, right? And so solar is, I would say, a part of the mix. Like you have wind, right, which you can harvest at large scales. And the other thing too, solar can be transported across, state lines per se, right? So a lot of the solar that we produce in California, for example, it ends up getting shipped to places such as Arizona, because what happens is, depending on the time of year in California, we have so much solar that the grid can't accommodate all of it. And so we actually have to ship some out. And so I think, longer term solution that's much higher than my pay grade, depending on proximity to California, it's definitely possible to ship solar to different places. And, other places can benefit from solar that's generated here, even though it's not generated in the same, abundance as other places.
Right, and there's large solar farms, like if you're driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, there's large solar farms out there in areas that have very high UV exposure.
Yep. And so that's another part of the equation, right? Although we project that 50% of the homes will have solar installed by 2045, it's not 100%, right? And so a lot of the solar, and that's not enough to meet all the need that we can meet. So to your point, there's residential solar, there's like solar that goes on commercial buildings, and then there's what's called utility scale solar, where you're able to find a big patch of land in an area that has lots of sun exposure, like heading from Los Angeles to Las Vegas or vice versa, or you're able to create solar and feed that back into the grid. And there's actually even rates that are established. Say, for example, where if you in your home, for whatever reason, can't generate solar on your rooftop, you can still purchase the solar that's being produced, by some of these different outfits, I'll say.
Right. And you mentioned, I believe you said 2045 is Southern California Edison's plan to go carbon neutral. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yep, that's right.
Obviously that seems so far away. That's 25 years. Like, for the average person, what's happening the next 1 to 5 years that, whether it's individual decisions that a homeowner can make, or as just a generic consumer, changes in the electrical grid or electrical production, what's happening the next 5 years that maybe we don't know about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the 2045, that's what we're calling our pathway to decarbonization, right? We want to become carbon neutral over from now on 2045. It seems like a long ways away, but when you consider the lift that has to be done to get us there, it's really not a long ways away. And to answer your question specifically, that strategy is built on 4 or 5 different pillars. So some of them involve the customer, some of them don't, but the most important piece, I would say, involves or includes end consumers. So starting at the very top, the first part of that, the strategy to achieve carbon neutrality would be so first thing is decarbonizing the electrical grid by adding more renewables, right? So solar, wind, hydro, and some other stuff. Second thing that will be the most significant in terms of a carbon decrease or decarbonization would be transportation electrification. And so when you talk about what can people do, the biggest impact from an environment standpoint comes from transportation. And so, the Elon Musk is doing his best to drive down the the cost curve, right? He's driving towards that $25,000 electric vehicle, and that's where we see the most emissions from. And so, switching out your vehicle from gas to electric or hybrid, that's where we see the biggest bang for our buck overall, and that's the biggest impact that a consumer can make. That's the second pillar. The third pillar that we are focusing on is electrifying different buildings, like I mentioned earlier. And so if you look at just a person's residence, for example, the majority of the emissions that comes from a person's home comes from, one that's kind of invisible is, one, the utility creates electricity, and, there's some, not so friendly resources that go into creating the electricity. That's one. So the utility's doing their part to clean the grid. But outside of that, if you look at the heat pumps, look at the water heaters and the stoves and the HVAC systems, eventually swapping those things out for electric end uses, specifically heat pump. So you have heat pump water heaters and heat pump HVAC systems, which have you see a fairly significant reduction in emissions that are produced from the home. So that would be the sort of the third pillar. And the last pillar, which the consumer can't necessarily help with, all those things combined will get us pretty far. But that's, if we X'd out all those sources of emissions, we still wouldn't get there. And so there's going to be like some carbon sinking that'll have to happen to eventually get us to the pathway of being carbon neutral by 2045. So just to sum it up, from a customer perspective, to the extent that it's affordable, and it's getting more affordable by the day, electrify your home with a heat pump water heater. That's the biggest source. And whenever you swap out your HVAC system, swapping it out with a heat pump HVAC system, which runs much more efficiently. And then to the extent that you could, purchase an electric vehicle, Elon Musk, please get us there. And Musk we trust.
We also have, I think GM just announced 2 days ago about the revamping the factory in Detroit. I believe they're going to make 11 different electric vehicles out of that. They also announced the Hummer truck, which is a $120,000 vehicle. But you have Rivian, you have maybe Nikola, who knows if they're actually going to produce. Yeah. But you have Lordstown Motors, you have Ford that's working with Rivian, you have Tesla is making the Cybertruck. So there's a lot of stuff out there that's a lot. There's going to be a lot of new EVs on the market, both cars, trucks, SUVs. But there's going to be a lot of them on the market real soon as Q1, Q2 of next year.
Yeah, which is great. And they're all stepping their game up from a design perspective too, right?
Other than the Cybertruck, this thing's ugly.
It's ugly, but it's ugly and cute at the same time.
The Rivian is kind of like my dream vehicle. I'm not going to buy it right away, but like I'll wait 4 or 5 years and buy a used one.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the thing too. The used markets for EVs are starting to expand a little bit. And something that the utilities do, just for people, a lot of the utilities offer, at Southern California Edison, we offer what's called a clean fuel rebate. We have a clean fuel rebate program. And so we will give like a $2,000 incentive towards the purchase of an electric vehicle. And there's a lot of other utility programs that offer similar rebates as well. And so that's kind of our contribution to, helping to achieve carbon neutrality and help people to drive, vehicles that emit less pollutants.
Right. I want to thank you for coming on, Randy. One, it's always great to catch up with you. But also, I think a lot of people don't see what's going on behind the scenes. And even just talking about some of the, both long-term and short-term plans, this helps people feel a little bit more optimistic when there is a lot of pessimism out there right now, and for good cause. So I appreciate you bringing some optimism to what's going on behind the scenes. I really appreciate that. I do want to end the way I typically end all my interviews, so get back to beer. So I know we were talking beforehand. You said you were kind of a late bloomer when it came to alcohol. Do you remember your first experience with beer?
Yes, I was. So I lied earlier. I said, well, I'll put it this way: the age that I started drinking socially was around 25. But my first experience with beer, I think I was maybe a junior or a senior in college. And some of my really, really great friends who I play golf with peer pressured me into drinking beer, but knew that I didn't have the palate for it. So they
Well,
got me like
if you're, I was gonna say, if you're playing golf, I'm assuming it's gonna be Coors Light, right?
You know what? I actually cannot function while drinking and playing golf. Some of my other friends, it helps them play better. But so if I'm on the golf course, I'm not drinking anything because it just completely throws off my game. But first experience drinking beer wasn't playing golf. It was at a bar by campus in Berkeley, and just a Hefeweizen, something that's light and weedy and tasty to a beginner's palate, I'll say.
Right. And that will transition to the next question is, so as you developed your palate, what are some of your favorite styles of beer right now?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite style by far would be an IPA. Any kind of IPA. I love all IPAs. The only requirement that I have is that it has a high alcohol concentration. That's it.
Awesome. And then do you have one or two favorite California breweries?
This would be a great opportunity for me to plug something in California, but to be honest, I don't have a favorite brewery.
We can always plug our classmate.
Who's our classmate?
Peter Mumford.
Peter Rumford? Favorite brewery in California is the Mumford Brewery. Yeah.
Do you have maybe one or two that you buy more regularly than others?
No, I'm an equal opportunist when it comes to beer, to be quite honest.
California has lots of good IPAs, so.
I like variety. I like trying something different every single time for me, it's an experience. So.
Right. Do you have a favorite outside of California? Do you have like a favorite memorable beer or brewery?
I wouldn't say I have a favorite beer or brewery outside of California, but I will say that I went to Ireland a couple years back, and they start lining up at the bars at literally like 12 o'clock, like daytime, and they go pretty hard to about 4 in the morning. And this is like on a Monday, Tuesday, obviously pre-COVID, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I thought it was an anomaly, but it's kind of just a part of the culture. And so, some of the beer and spirits that I was able to taste there were pretty incredible. And, they've just got a great beer and alcohol culture, I'll say. From beer and spirits culture, I'll say. It's very spirited.
That's awesome. Randy, thanks again. I appreciate the time. Everyone, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and join you next week for a happy hour. Cheers, Randy.
Awesome. Cheers, man. Thank you.